So what does it actually mean when we talk about God being gracious and merciful? Welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving into Dr. Robert Peterson's deep theological study on these specific divine attributes. And look, we're not just running through a dusty list of ancient traits here. We're going to take a profound look at how these massive concepts practically shape our everyday human experience.
We're pulling our insights directly from Session 16 of Dr. Peterson's academic lecture series. Now, I know academic theology can sometimes feel, well, a bit abstract, right? So we are going to break these high-level concepts down to see exactly how the original texts weave the whole shebang together.
Here's our roadmap for this explainer. 1. Defining grace and mercy. 2. The language of divine love. 3. Saving and enabling grace. 4. Grace across time. And finally, living what we'll call the Platinum Rule.
Section 1. Defining grace and mercy. Let's establish a really clear baseline for these two huge and honestly often misunderstood concepts.
The absolute crucial point here is that grace isn't just about God being generically nice. It's so much bigger than that. It's about deep compassion that gives us the precise opposite of what we've actually earned. By definition, it is completely undeserved favor. It's a radical, mind-blowing kind of generosity that shows up exactly when punishment is what's actually warranted.
And then there's mercy. We really need to clarify that mercy is not just withholding judgment. I mean, sure, it can mean that, but more accurately, it means seeing someone's affliction, actually being moved by that misery, and actively stepping in to relieve it. It's compassion, but it's action-oriented compassion.
Moving on to Section 2, the language of divine love. Let's look at how the biblical writers historically tried to capture these massive ideas.
Dr. Peterson points out this totally fascinating textual pattern. Writers like the Apostle Paul love to use what we can call a piling up effect. They literally stack overlapping words right on top of each other. Love, grace, mercy, goodness, patience. You see, they aren't trying to draw these sharp, rigid boundaries between each characteristic. Instead, they pile them up to create this dynamic, undeniable sense of overwhelming generosity. When you read these ancient letters, it's like you can almost feel the writers desperately grasping for enough words to capture the sheer magnitude of God's character.
And this brings us to a brilliantly relatable metaphor. Check out Hosea chapter 11. Here, God is pictured as a loving parent, gently holding a toddler's arms to teach them how to walk. The text talks about leading them with cords of kindness, with bands of love. It's wild because the actual word grace isn't even used in this specific verse. But the concept? It is unmistakably there in that intimate, tender language.
These are the everyday metaphorical anchors that ground really high theology into raw human experience. We see God described as the champion of widows in Psalm 68, a relentless husband to an unfaithful people in Hosea 3, and, like we just saw, a tender parent teaching a child to walk. These everyday pictures take incredibly lofty concepts and make them deeply personal and, honestly, super understandable for us.
Okay, Section 3, Saving and Enabling Grace. Here, theologians helpfully break grace down to understand how it actively operates in our lives.
This visual contrast really helps us pull apart saving grace from enabling grace. Saving grace is that fundamental initial salvation. It's God's unmerited love stepping in at the most critical moment. But you know, grace doesn't just punch your ticket and stop there. Enabling grace is the ongoing daily power that gives believers the actual ability to live out their faith day to day. It's like Paul notes in Corinthians, he worked incredibly hard, sure, but it was the grace of God with him that provided the energy and the endurance to keep going.
Theologians make this distinction to help us understand it better, but make no mistake, they are intrinsically linked. They definitely have distinct emphases, one highlighting love, the other highlighting power, but the first is never without power, and the second is literally never without love. They are basically two sides of the exact same divine coin, working continuously to sustain a believer.
Let's head into Section 4, Grace Across Time. We're mapping out past, present, and future, because grace is definitely not just a one-time historical event.
You know, we way too often consign grace strictly to the past. We think of it only as that initial moment of salvation, like a box we checked off years ago. But it operates so much wider than that. It is a past reality that justifies believers, absolutely. But it's also a present enablement, encouraging us to boldly approach the throne of grace right now in our daily struggles. And on top of that, it's a staggering future hope tied to the ultimate revelation of Jesus Christ. It literally covers the entire spectrum of human existence.
To really grasp this kind of absolute security, Dr. Peterson uses a beautiful anecdote.
Imagine you realized you had messed up and wronged a senior mentor, someone you know deeply loves and accepts you unconditionally. You wouldn't run away and hide in fear, right? No way. Because you are secure in their love, you'd immediately pick up the phone. You'd run straight to them to make it right. Well, divine grace functions exactly the same way. It completely removes the fear of judgment and replaces it with total trust.
Because grace spans the past, the present, and the future, believers are essentially smothered in a good sense by grace. It totally surrounds the individual from every single angle. It provides not just the unbreakable foundation for faith, but the daily fuel you need to keep moving today, and the ultimate hope for tomorrow.
Finally, Section 5, Living the Platinum Rule. Let's talk about what this means for how we operate today. Because believers have received this immense, totally unmerited mercy, they aren't just supposed to passively sit back and enjoy the ride. They are expected to be permanently marked by it. The text calls Christians to be experts in forgiveness and mercy. That means freely and generously dishing it out to others, precisely because they have been so thoroughly forgiven themselves.
And this brilliantly leads us right into Ephesians 4:32, which acts as what we'll call the platinum rule. We all know the golden rule, right? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Well, this goes a massive step further. It commands believers to forgive others based not on shifting human standards, but on the massive, unfathomable scale of God's forgiveness toward them.
So, I'm going to leave you with this final thought to ponder as we wrap up this explainer. If grace and mercy are these active, enabling powers that completely span your past, your present, and your future, how does understanding the sheer magnitude of that divine grace fundamentally change the way you treat the people around you today? Thanks for diving into this with me. I hope this structured look brought some real powerful clarity to your studies.